particularly.
Sorry, Deb.
Oh, that's okay. And a little bit about when you are in a startup situation, you are working with limited funds. You don't necessarily, most of the time, sometimes that's not the case, but you don't necessarily have the luxury that larger brands do when it comes to storytelling, working with multiple agencies and partners, et cetera. And I'm gonna address that a little bit as well. So I'm just gonna hit this continue button. So to jump right in, media relations is purely storytelling. It sounds very plain, but it's not necessarily simple. A lot of things have to go into considering on what makes a good story. My method and my practice and what I've been kind of taught over the course of my career through my mentors and some great leaders that I've worked with is, in order to tell a unique story from a personal perspective or from a brand perspective, people need to stop and you need to get very thoughtful. You need to look inward and dig deep and really answer some tough questions, not only for the brand story that you're looking to tell, but about what it is, the difference that you bring to the process. Be honest about the difference, be honest about the competition, really sit down and look at your story from every different avenue to really explore how your story must be different in order to break through. And I'll repeat this probably a couple of different times as we go through this deck tonight, but I really think that that is a really unique opportunity that we all have. And it's one that excites me when I work with different people. And that is, everybody is different and every brand is different. Good brands are different. And it's up to you to find what the difference is and then just become good at telling your story. Those who are successful at storytelling keep it simple. They keep it easily understood. And that really is the work. So let's get into breaking that down a little bit and start to identify what that really means. Sorry, I'm ahead of myself. I'm going to take you through a couple of examples and a couple of stories. This presentation will be available to you after this session, so I'm not necessarily going to read through all of them word for word. And if you could mute your microphone, that would also be really helpful, guys. So when I start working with somebody from a personal perspective and from a brand perspective, I take everybody through an exercise that I'm actually going to leave you with tonight. So it's a little bit of my secret sauce, and I'm happy to share that. But I'm going to go through a couple of end results of some brands that I've worked with that actually have gone on to do some pretty successful things. And my approach is, I always start all brand strategy work that I do with people with the background and the story of the person who founded the business. The reason why I do that is I find, as a creative person and as a storyteller, that really helps me to get behind the get to the DNA of what the brand is and what the brand has to offer. So the first example I'm going to share is a female-led digital food destination called Crum that was started by a female founder, Devin Connell, who is a former Food Network food personality, an author, a chef, and the owner of 3 restaurants. And she wanted to pivot her business to go in a different direction, because what she was really finding was that she was getting stuck doing too many things. And at the end of the day, all she really wanted to be simply was a cooking teacher, because that's what she loved to do. She wants to tell and show people how to cook. But she had too many narratives going on with too many different businesses going on. So after a bit of a false start, she came to me and said, I really need to understand what my point of difference is and what my brand is going to stand for. So after doing a little bit of that deep dive and those tough questions asking that I talked about at the beginning, I'll give you an example of what a story sounds like once we've done the work. And everybody can do this work, by the way. This is something that, you can work with a consultant to do this kind of work, or I'm going to leave you with the questions that you can ask yourself to start to get to the bottom of what the story of you and your company is. So this is Devin, and I'm going to read through her story so you get a better sense of just how deep the storytelling can go. So for a good time, call Devin. After 15 years in the food industry as a chef, a restaurateur, a television personality, Chef Devin Connell has come to a realization. or better yet, a revelation. Her one true love, the love that comes before anything else, is her passion for creating occasions. Because listen, everyone can have a good time, but Devin Connell knows how to make a good time because she knows that life comes down to just that, time. Life is made of moments of time. Devin knows that moments are made to count. She also knows that the key to a good time is in the idea, the prep, the details, and the mix. And of course, the food. You see, Devin was born to do this. She's kind of food royalty. She literally grew up around food and reasons to celebrate. Her mother, Linda, was the founder of the legendary Ace Bakery and also was and still is a master entertainer. So this little Devin apple fell right next to that Linda tree. Now, Chef Devin's unpretentious approach to entertaining is stuff of her own legend, and whether it's her annual hot wings and champagne party, her backyard hot and sexy multiple martini bar summer situation, or a build your best bear birthday party for one of her 2 young sons, the secret sauce to the success of any of her events remains the same, but a little more on that later. She has the cred and the authenticity that other digital food first talent can only dream of. It is that IRL experience that has led her to create the digital influence hub, Crum. She believes the fundamentals are essential and preparation puts the good in good time. So let Dev show us all how to take the special out of occasion, the precious out of the moment, the stuffy out of soiree, and the fancy out of the fete, and just have a good time. Once we distilled the essence of Devin's brand DNA down to what is really her story. This is what makes her unique. It's what makes her special. It really describes what she loves to do. We went on to take some of this language, wrap it around all the assets of her brand, from her website to her Instagram channel. And a year later, here we are in October of next year. The site is thriving. Her business is humming. She very simply has a story that she's very comfortable to talk about, that translates across all aspects of the businesses. And she's launching her first cookbook with Indigo in October of next year. That we actually spent all of COVID shooting, which is kind of a nice way to spend COVID, to be honest. So that's just one example of one person who felt a little stuck in her business and really wasn't able to communicate what it was, but the whole time she had that unique story in her. And I believe that all of us do. Included in this deck are the brand stories of someone I met through Clio, actually, who I became very fond of. And she's one of our country's most preeminent female-led DJs and music influencers. And I did some work with Lissimone to kind of get to the root of what her brand story was and how we can reposition her brand a little bit to achieve some of her dreams and goals. And you can read that at your leisure. The next example is Kaylee Heaps. Estrin, who owns a very successful real estate business in Canada called Heaps Estrin. And she was also looking to distill and find out what her brand story was in order to take that new story and refresh the assets of her brand as her business was growing and thriving. And she felt that her story had gotten a bit stale, which can happen. You can reinvent your story as you grow and evolve as a business and a human. It's a very natural thing to want to do, and something that's actually very effective for business when you need some new news to tell. So again, this is working in another sector of real estate, both residential and commercial. And then interior design is Suzanne Dimma, who was the editor-in-chief very successfully of House and Home, and an interior designer with a thriving business, including in-store branding, merchandise with Hudson's Bay, who, when she left the magazine, wanted to reinvent her design business and as well as some of the other businesses she was launching. So again, at your leisure, these are the examples of some of the businesses and people that I've worked with. In my process, after we kind of get to the root of the brand story, we've got the language that can take across all assets. But one of the biggest pieces that I like to come out of talking with somebody about the story of them and their business is getting to what I would call the brand essence. And then getting into what we'll move on to next is understanding the brand promise. So the essence of a brand very much comes down to 5 common principles. The essence of your brand is, what is your brand's spirit? What is the singular idea that, if pressured or discussed, or you are enthusiastic about telling someone the story of your business and your brand, is what is the one idea even emotion that your brand is based around. The essence of your brand gives a path to inspire your employee base. It gives a path to inspire your partners. It's a path to inspire your investors. It is something that you work to get people excited about what you're doing with your business and how your business is going to change people's lives, if that is indeed what it's going to be. It's inwardly focused. It really talks to what you go to work to do every single day and why people should believe in what you're doing. And once you distill down and define a brand essence and a brand promise, it is a tool that you use to inform everything. Not a decision gets made in the business unless it is centered around the brand essence. If you can't answer the fundamental question of, will this still make us true to that? For every decision you make as a business owner, again, this is my opinion, it makes decision making very easy most of the time, because once you nail down and cement what it is your brand stands for and what you believe as an owner, as an employee, as a partner, or as an investor, if it doesn't sit right with the essence of the brand, then you can quickly move on to find other decisions that you can affect change that do. So for example, some very famous brand essences and brand position, Nike, and there's so many I love. I have to say, to find a handful to stick is really hard, because there are ones that I just find so inspirational. I think they are the work of genius. Nike's brand essence is everyone is an athlete. And that's what they feel. They feel that the spirit of their brand is every single person has it in them to move their body, and that moving your body will help your mind and help you create a better life. So as an executive team, I would imagine, having done some work with this brand, and it was a joy and an experience that I won't soon forget because they're pretty epic, unless the decision that they want to make, who they partner with, products, endorsements, unless it can go back to, does it empower everyone to feel like they are an athlete? And if the answer is no, you move along. Glossier, one of my favorite brands. We worked on a pop-up in Toronto when they came up here that was a bit of a runaway success. And what they want to do is democratize beauty. This is a brand that was founded by beauty editors. And in the lifestyle media world, beauty editors are legendary for one thing. They really believe in the root and the science of beauty products. And a beauty editor is as much a scientist and an investigative reporter as they are somebody who likes to tell people of what any kind of beauty product, what they think will make them feel good. And the founders of this particular brand found that beauty was so polarizing from the perspective of it either cost a lot of money or it cost a little bit of money. They didn't feel that there was a line that beauty could be for everybody, no matter how you identify, no matter how much money that you have. And so Glossier, which is such a runaway success, their position was they want to democratize the beauty business and make good beauty available to everybody, no matter where you come from, no matter what your desires are, no matter what you look like, and no matter how much money you have to spend. And I think we can all agree they've successfully done that. Well, Simple, again, another runaway success story of a brand, is that their MO was very much investing for everybody. So they fundamentally believe that investing and good investment advice and being able to invest for yourself, for your family, for your future needs to be available to everyone. Quite similar to Glossier's perspective on democratizing beauty, well, Simple is very much about everybody should be able to have financial intelligence, that understanding finances, understanding investing, to be able to take some of the stigma and mystery outside of that experience, or excuse me, away from that experience, is very important. And again, you see the success of the brand and where they've gone to, and it's a wonderful brand story. So there's not a huge difference between a brand promise and a brand essence. Outside of a sentence of a brand promise is a little bit more action towards it. So to put it simply, brand positioning is the process of positioning your brand in the mind of your customers. So it's your idea to identify and own a niche and create a unique impression so they associate something specific with your brand. And also it's what sets you apart from the rest of the market. A positioning statement should be maximum 2 sentences. And it really is a declaration and your promise to your customer, to your partners, and to your employees of this is what your brand is going to do. That defines the market is pretty important in your brand promise. What category are you competing in, and what context does your brand have relevance? What is the opportunity that affords people with the brand? The target customer, you should investigate this concise summary of the attitudinal and demographic description of the target group. Who are you trying to appeal to? Who do you want to attract? Brand promise, what is your most compelling, emotional or rational or both benefit to your customers that you can own relative to the competition? And that piece of it for me is something that can be very important and can be very difficult to get to and can take a lot of jumping in and out of the work to figure it out. But what can you comfortably say that you can do for whoever the audience is that you're targeting to sell your product to or get invested in your organization? What do you have that's different from the others? What do you have that other folks don't have? What can you do that they cannot? And that is a very compelling thing to promise and to figure out. And then what is the evidence that you can provide? In my business and marketing, we call that, what is the reason to believe? What can you demonstrate that your brand delivers on its brand promise? And those are the kind of language and assets that you can roll out across a number of different channels. That can be through marketing collateral materials. Most of these days, that power is in digital. That can be evidence you produce in an advertising campaign. It can be produced across all the social media marketing and all of those channels. And that is leaving those breadcrumbs for people to really understand and believe. It's really extending a campaign around your brand. Good advertising campaigns are mostly centered on reasons to believe. And what evidence can you show me? What additional stories can you tell? Do you have spokespeople that you can work with if that's relevant to your brand journey and your experience? But the more you gain a little bit more traction under your feet and history to the company, you want to start to be able to develop a really strong catalog of that brand experience and that evidence and those reasons to believe to continue to give your customers reasons to engage with the brand. So for Devon, going back to her and her brand promise after we dove into the work is that Crum by Devon Connell is a one-of-a-kind digital destination that shows people how to have a good time. We've identified the name of the brand, the founder of the brand to make it personal because the brand is 100% about her. She is the face. Everything comes down to Devon. We have made the commitment to telling our customers that we're a one-of-a-kind digital destination. And basically that is, she works to ensure that her approach to food and simple, delicious, entertaining, and cooking is different from other people. We can make the claim that it is a one-of-a-kind digital destination, and it is a digital destination. We will translate into books with her because books is what she wants to do, but all of that will also find its root and home in digital. And she wants to teach people that she wants to show them how to have a good time. She's not about complicated, involved recipes. Devon is about setting yourself up for success in your home kitchen so you can cook and enjoy and have a good time. And that's what her recipes do. And it's all very simple. And it's proven to be a very effective use of language. For DJ LaSimone, we repositioned the company brand name as entirety to resonate sound. And her brand promise was get a move on. Her whole reason to believe in her as one of the most preeminent authorities on music and female-led DJ in the country is that she lives to get people to move. And it's not just get up and dance and move, but it is just to get up and be inspired and let music inspire you. That means there's a lot of action to this brand promise. It's you got to get up and you got to get a move on if you want to start to really feel life. And she feels that that is what music affords people to do. And it's a very powerful brand statement. It's one of the most favorite ones I've ever worked on. I know Cleo was pretty excited about it when we worked on this together as well. And then the Heaps Estrin brand promise that came out of the result of a lot of work on the real estate side was Heaps Estrid knows how to live, and they do know how to live. The founder of this business is someone, when I started the personal work with her, I've never met someone who has stories about living that have been so inspiring. And it's not about having a lot of money, and it's not about anything fancy. It was about clearing the rug out of the living room, kicking your shoes off, just having a good time, understanding the simple joys of life, understanding how a space and home can really affect the promise of a family, no matter what that looks like for you. And the second part of her brand promise is the knows part. Her team is so knowledgeable about the different areas in the country, in particular Toronto, Ontario, GTA, of they know a lot, and they can tell you how to live based on what it is that you're looking for. They've taken this language and they have used it across all of their brand assets, materials, all of their marketing seminars, and it's proven to be very effective. But again, to go back and look at it, nothing that I'm showing you is complicated. The process to get to this work is involved and takes some thinking and some real hard looking inside, but everything is so simple. Nothing is complicated. And it is a brand story that should be easy to tell, that you should be able to spit out your elevator on what your brand does and what it means for you and your customer. And it should not be much longer than this. Suzanne Dimma's brand promise is Suzanne Dimma will give you space, because that's what she feels her business and her design aesthetic does for her customers, is that she understands the concept of space. And her gift to the customers that she works with, whether it's in a large capacity or a small capacity, is that she will give you space. And that is another example of one of the brand promises that was really powerful and effective. I worked something example of a little bit longer. There's a beautiful golf course development in Cape Breton that has become, the 2 courses there, I believe, are number 1 and 9 in the world now. It launched 8 years ago to the day, because I remember I went out there for the first time when I found out I was pregnant with my one and only little 8-year-old son. So I know exactly how long ago this project is, because he just had a birthday. And the Cabot brand promise is very simple. Once they did this incredible project in the East Coast of Canada, it was so successful. They're now working on projects in St. Lucia, in Revelstoke, and in Ireland. And what they wanted to do was create a master brand called Cabot that they then will apply to the 4 properties as they rolled out. We're still working together. They've become good friends, actually, and a great client. But what they wanted to express in their brand expression and their brand promise was all of the things that are important to them when choosing a destination to build a course and a hotel resort in, is that a Cabot experience is a memory-making, one-of-a-kind adventure destination that contributes to an authentic and beautiful life. Cabot is committed to supporting, enriching, and honoring the local communities in which they operate. In addition to a one-of-a-kind adventure and a top-of-the-line experience in golf and hospitality, every site that the team and the ownership team, and particularly the founder of the business, is committing to, is when they go into a community, they need to be uplifting the community in some way. Their first project, they basically revitalized a mining town of 600 people that was about to die. And now every single person in that community has a job. They employ over 500 people, whether it is the caddy on the golf course was when I went out to play, was the retired high school principal or somebody who used to have a job. And what they are committed to with their project is investing in the community in which they operate in order to make sure they honor the local tradition and that they're lifting the community up. It's a really beautiful brand expression and a very successful business. The Museum of Contemporary Art in Toronto, another client that I worked with, when they opened their beautiful new building, and they had to really go in and compete with contemporary art museums all over the world for different exhibits. This is a beautiful one, and their leadership team is really something to make this claim, was the Museum of Contemporary Art Toronto will make you think differently. And that's, at the end of the day, what good art should do. It should make you think, and it should be accessible to everybody, and it should honor the community as well. But the ultimate promise of this particular brand as one of the most preeminent contemporary art museums in the world was, we just want to make you think differently. And if you leave our institution, having had your mind open or start to think differently about something, then we've achieved our brand promise to you as a visitor to the museum. Beautiful gin brand, Empress 1908, that is founded in Victoria, BC, and is blown up around the world. Two young guys from Victoria founded this brand, and they've enjoyed quite the success with it. I encourage you to go on their Instagram handle, which is Empress 1908, and you can see just the beautiful expression of the brand. But we worked with them. It's a gin brand. That Empress 1908 is the beginning of the most beautiful cocktail experience in the world. And if you see them on Instagram, you'll get a sense of it. It's blue liquid that, when expressed by a number of cocktails, it's delicious, and it's all natural, and it's super tasty, but it is absolutely gorgeous and stunning, and makes some of the most beautiful cocktails that you've seen. And by beautiful cocktail experience in the world, the word experience was pretty critical to this one, because what they want to do is be at the root of what will be a great experience, no matter what that looks like to you. It's not just about the drink. So when I talked a little bit about some of those critical questions that you should be asking yourself when you are kind of trying to define your brand story, what are the goals for the brand? Like, what do you want to do? Why are you doing it? And be very honest in answering this question. What is the problem you're solving, or the opportunity you're creating? How will it be different? Like, there's got to be something about the project that you want to create, or the work that you're doing, that is going to be solving a problem or creating an opportunity. What stage of the narrative are you at? Are you very first startup? You're just out of school, everything's at the beginning. Are you more like Devin, who was looking to pivot her brand a little bit? Have you left a corporate career in order to take the leap into entrepreneurship? And what does that look like for you? Be very honest about it. Who's the audience for your story? Who's your customer? Who's your competition? Look at, who do you admire? The biggest one for me, that I think is the hardest one for a lot of people, are, why are you doing what you do? Why is it important to you to do this work? What does it mean to you? What are you doing that you want to change? I want to change things that I do every single day. And I imagine most of the people that are probably out there do too. How will success be measured for you, for your partners, for your customers, for your investors? What is mandatory? What is both positive and negative? What will you absolutely not do? What is a deal breaker for you? And what do you have to do? What is something that you just cannot see yourself not involving in the business? What are the must-haves and what are the deal breakers? And stick to those, because it's really, really important, because it will help you determine your brand story. And then, what does the dream look like? If you're being very honest with yourself, what is it that you want to see this thing become? Not what your partner does, not what your spouse does, not what anybody else but you. What does the dream look like for you? I am only me. I work with just me, and I work with my clients. And when I made the leap to decide for myself that I wanted to just be solo, the dream for me was, I have worked for someone else in a large agency or corporate environment for 30 years. I've been working since I was 19 years old. And at the point in my dream where I just said to myself, it really didn't have anything to do with the business. For me, I have a husband that has a very successful corporate career that he enjoys very much. At the time, I had a little boy who was 4. And my dream was, I just want to hold his hand and take him to school in the morning. And I don't want to have a full-time caregiver in my house anymore. And I want to be able to work how I want to work, when I want to work, as hard as I want to work. And I want to work with women, and I want to work with young people. And I remember writing those 6 points down and then saying to myself, how do I make that happen? And how do I get there? And just taking a year or two to mull over the plan. But for me, the dream was not about, my success looked very different than another person. But when I answered those questions honestly, for me, it was definitely about what I wanted my work life to look like and what I wanted my family life to look like. So that's an example of what it was for me. And that I didn't want to just continue down the path that I was on, but a lot of it was a mix of really wanting to understand the minds of young people more and support young women, But part of it was also, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've got this little person in my life, Charlie, and I want to spend more time with him, and it was important to me. So I came up with a plan and I went out and did it. So it's time to tell your story, and I would encourage you to do the exercises and do the works, whether or alone or with a partner or with an employee base, and really ask yourself, what do you want to say? What would you like to hear or read about your brand, organization, or project? If you had a dream headline, what would that look like? What is the headline for your story? And what impression do you really want to leave people, customers, and the media with? So we'll jump into kind of phase 2 of the presentation. And that is, Cleo was very kind to talk to me about it in the PR space, where I do have a significant bucket of experience. It's a huge part of the work that I did. But as we all know, that lens and that landscape has changed very much. When I was starting really diving headfirst into public relations from an entertainment, media, and marketing perspective, that was 20 years ago. And that's when there was budget and big newspapers and magazines with lots of inventory and lots of advertisers, and things have changed. So I tailor this part of my presentation to talk very much about how much things have changed, because they have. It's not the same anymore, but the fundamentals of how you tell that story, regardless of the media, have not. There's some very old school principles that I very firmly believe still apply. Journalists are journalists, and what they want is always going to be what they want. I'll talk about that. How to become a master storyteller is a little bit more of how do you actually tell the story, not the story that you're telling, but how do you get the words out of your mouth when you need to. This works in a boardroom as much as it does for a media opportunity. Developing key messages about your story and how to share those, how to come up with quotable quotes, and interview and event preparation. So a journalist is either assigned a story or brings a story idea to an editor. If I'm still doing the publicist piece of my job, which I do for some of my more high profile clients, I do things called pitching. So if I want to pitch my client's story out to an editor, or I have a plan for a publicity tour for somebody, it's my responsibility to bring that idea to an editor. However, I have a very solid network of journalists in this country, including a lot of the more up and coming ones now, which again, I think goes back to my original point of I'll talk about your network in a second, but you have to nurture it and you have to keep it, because you also want to be top of mind when a good journalist is saying, hey, I'm working on a story about Bitcoin and fintech, and I really want to know, do you have any clients I should be talking to? So I get that a lot. They're given a word count. They're on a deadline. It could be anywhere from an hour to weeks. They often rarely do ever write the headline for the story. They submit their story, and that headline is written by an editor, and they don't see the final edit until it's been published. So what do they want? They want to be first. Good journalists want good stories. They want it to be exclusive, and they want it to be a juicy interview that is investigative journalism is something completely different, in crisis communications. That's a whole other startup school that hopefully none of you ever have to face. But I do a lot of work in crisis as well. But this is a little bit more on the lifestyle business side of the press. They want to just give their audience news they can use, and really interesting stories, and stories of interest that they think a multiple audience will want, because that's their product and that's what they're selling. They want to develop good sources and spokespeople so they can come back to people multiple times. They want timely responses, and deadlines must be respected. They want to be fair and accurate. But most of all, they want a good story. So this is when I talk about that storytelling applies to every aspect of your business. If media is going to be a part of your journey, you just need to know how to spin a good tale. So what makes a good story? 3 things. It's content, context, and color. Content is your key messages. What do you want to deliver and what do you need to say? Context is proof points that give your message relevance and credibility. And color. I mean, good stories are not just point and shoot, this is what I do and this is why it works. You want to bring your story to life with anecdotes, because it makes what you say understandable and ultimately quotable. So prep for any kind of media opportunity, or I actually call it prep for a pitch. Journalists, you can even throw this over to investors, because the investors are probably going to ask you a lot more hard-hitting questions than a journalist ever will. So once you've got your story nailed down, you can use it across multiple platforms. But people, particularly journalists, are looking for a great soundbite. So do your best to get that out at the top. And a good quote uses everyday language. It avoids jargon and acronyms. I worked for Microsoft, was one of my clients in the very early days of that business. And the amount of jargon and acronyms and big words that the executive team of that company felt that they had to use, I was like, there's going to be nobody else like this. It's every executive team. They feel that the fancier the language and the more of the marketing short strokes chat that they use, people just want you to talk like a human being. They want to hear from you. They don't need it to be complicated. They need it to be digestible. And using a lot of fancy doublespeak is not going to get you there. So when I'm working with clients, I'm prepping them for anything. I'm like, be yourself, talk like yourself, and don't make it complicated. It creates interest. You want to talk about things that are going to want people to ask you follow-up questions. And it's energetic and colorful. Nobody wants to talk with a dud. And if you don't feel that you are your company's best spokesperson, find somebody who is. Not everybody has to be the person to talk to the media. Not everybody has to be the person at the head of the boardroom table. If you feel that's not your sweet spot, you find somebody whose it is. Media landscape, talked a lot about how it's changed. Digital is leading the charge. I don't think that will be a surprise to anybody. Social, second in command, part of that digital landscape. Traditional print still exists. I certainly hope it never goes away because it's a part of my Sunday every day. I love the newspaper. I feel that I'm going to be part of a dying breed with that one. Broadcast will continue to exist. There's too much money invested in traditional advertising revenue and media with broadcast, so I don't necessarily see that going away anytime soon. And with streamers and digital services and traditional broadcast getting into that streaming community, broadcast will exist in one form or another. Podcasts are only going up. It's one of the most popular forms of media. I'm currently working with one of my clients is launching her podcast in May. The revenue stream that she will see from that podcast is well almost into the six figures at this point. The number of brands that are attracted to work on podcasts are massive. The different production companies that are out there producing podcasts are growing and doubling by the day, and the revenue that's involved is incredibly attractive. So not only is advertising on podcasts a medium I highly recommend for a lot of my clients, I recommend for a lot of clients, get on podcasts if you feel it's going to tell your story and speak to it. It is a fast, easy, digestible way to do it. I've been on Clio's and I had a lot of fun. My business is very behind the scenes. Nobody needs to know who I am. People need to know who my clients are. I believe that, but I was a guest on her podcast and I had a blast and it was really fun. So I suggest that as one of an outlet for you. Radio is still relevant, absolutely. So I think that is also a good outlet for people. And then there's something I'm calling the COVID reality. That in COVID, there are people that are looking for a lot more people to fill a lot more space because a lot of people are at home and they are looking for content. So that could actually be good news for people. Preparation for any interview, I'm going to keep calling that preparation for any pitch because you're still pitching, is do your homework. Know who you're talking to. There's nothing worse than getting into a room or getting into an interview situation and you know when somebody has not done the homework of who they're talking to. There are stories in the landscape of the journalists that I know and some of the investors that I've worked with that are like, they had no idea who was in the room and they had no idea who I was in the interview. So you really have to do your research on who you're going to be speaking with. Anticipate the likely questions, especially the tough ones. If you know a hard question is coming, work on it, practice it, know your answers to everything, anticipate what you think they're going to ask, and especially work hard on the tough ones. Don't repeat negative questions back to people. If somebody asks you a negative question, don't lead with that. Nobody wants to hear it and will only reinforce the negative. And there are no bad questions. And if you dread a question, I'll repeat this a lot, expect it and prepare for it. That is in a pitch meeting as much as it's in an interview. If you know they're going to look at a financial and come at you with questions, you have to be ready to answer the questions, even the ones that you dread and you're just not looking forward to answering. What to do in an interview? Listen and pause and question or clarify if you have to. There's no rush. You're going to be given a length of time in an interview. I'll talk about television in a second, but you've got some time here. Or if you're on a panel, it's the same principle applies. You're up there, they're not rushing you off the stage, they're not rushing you through the interview. If you don't understand the question, ask for clarification. There's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't make you look silly. It actually makes you look like you're thoughtful and smart and you're paying attention. Pause. Again, don't rush. And if you feel like you've got a bit of a mental beat that you need to take, you can use something called a bridge phase, which buys you a little time. I'm so glad you asked me that. That is such a good question. Guys, I get asked that question all the time. And sometimes if you're a tiny bit nervous, it will help you collect your thoughts. Deliver your key messages, which is very simple. Answer the question, state your message, support it and illustrate it. Elaborate with another point you want to layer on top, expand with an anecdote, make it real, and use examples. It's just good storytelling. And tell the truth. Release confirmed facts, correct misinformation. Don't speculate if you don't know the answer. And if you don't, you connect them with somebody who does. If somebody asks you a question you can't answer, that's perfectly human. You know what? I don't know about that right now, but you know what I'm going to do? I will make it a priority to connect you with the person that does or get you the information that you need. What not to do? Speculate. Well, I think that could be the case. If you don't know, don't talk about it. Exaggerate. Don't do that either, because it could come back to bite you, and that's not what you want. Stray off topic. You probably see it a lot of times. I can remember when all of us were, if college was a part of our journey, where you had a professor or a lecturer and they just started to go down the rabbit hole way to the left, and you're like, oh my God, and they lose people with that. So don't do that. Sometimes it's difficult because you want to explain a little too much, but ultimately it's going to throw you off your game, and then you're going to have a long time to backtrack to get back, and you're going to lose your audience. Don't be thrown by hostile or investigative type questions. They're absolutely going to come at you, and you should be prepared for the tough stuff. Don't forget why you're there, and never forget your key messages. If you had to just get across 3 points that you really need to say, you should be going back to them over and over and over again. Do not reveal confidential information. People are tempted sometimes when a panel or a presentation or a media interview gets heated to want to talk about something that they know would just prove their point, but they're not ready yet. It's a bad idea, and most of the times it's illegal, so that's a hard pass. Don't say no comment. Nobody says no comment. You can decline participation, but saying no comment only happens in the movies and people that do it. It's not respected in any way. Don't go off the record. There's no such thing as off the record. So in journalism, a lot of people today will say, well, you can talk to me about that because it's off the record. As actually, there's no such thing as off the record. There is something called going on background, which is where you can safely talk to a journalist. And if you say this is on background, they legally have the obligation to not share what you're talking about. But I'm a big believer, and I've got very good relationships with the media. I will rarely get on any kind of confirmation or call unless it is on the record, and what I'm saying, anything coming out of my mouth, I wouldn't be sad to see in print. Again, I'm repeating this, don't repeat the negative. Somebody asks you a question to illustrate and they say, your company seems to be in big trouble these days and those numbers are not looking good to us, Susan. Well, the company's actually not in big trouble. That's repeating the negative. You flip them on their ear and you say, one of the things I'm most proud that my company has achieved through COVID in the last couple of years is a 10% growth in this one particular sector. And it's something I'm very proud of because, as you know, our business is all about X. So you've just taken the whole negative completely away. You've pivoted to a positive, and that is the route to take. Interview techniques, blocking and bridging. Always answer their questions, but don't limit your response to the exact question. Once they ask you a question, you can do what I just did. Their question was, is my business in trouble? And I went back at them with 10% growth in one sector. You can block the negative and then bridge to a positive, which was an example I just gave. And don't wait for an invitation to share your good news. This works in a pitch. This works on a panel. Nobody's going to give you the invitation to share good news. If you are in that interview and you've got a story that you want to tell or a piece of good news, find a way to get it in there because the invitation may never come. Flagging, this is a great technique. Put more emphasis on certain points. I just gave an example. Like the most important point I want to make, my entire focus and goal is, and you know, here's something I'm really excited about. You're building up the answer so people will pay attention. And cherry picking, this happens on panels all the time as well. They ask loaded multiple questions. Cherry pick out of their question what you want to answer and run with that. Print interview, which also applies to digital, obviously, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be on the phone. Prepare, prepare, prepare. A lot of time, I'll always say that. I'm a bit of a, you know, beating a dead horse when it comes to that particular thing, because I don't think you can be too prepared for anything. Isolate yourself, no distractions. Keep your key messages in front of you. There's nothing wrong with notes, and there's nothing wrong with taking notes. And since you can't see the face of the person, you can ask for feedback on your comments. And if they stretch out the silence, don't fill it. When you've answered your question, you stop. And if they're silent, it's a technique. It means they're wanting you to say more. They're wanting you to go off topic. They're wanting you to elaborate. When you're finished your point, it's okay to just stop. One-on-one in person, preparation in there at the top. I'll never change that. You try and control the location to be comfortable. You keep your messages in front of you. It's never a problem to have notes. And be yourself. Ask questions of the journalist. It doesn't all have to jump into your thing. You can ask questions. It's a dialogue. And the best interviews, the best meetings, I think we can all agree, come out of having a conversation with somebody. And again, if they stretch out the silence, you do not have to fill it. Podcast and radio, this is normally a longer format situation, so you need to be prepared with a lot to say and prepared to answer a lot. Find out if it's live or recorded. Make sure you're in a noise-free environment and get your energy level up, because when you're on podcast or radio, again, people can't see you, they can just hear you. So doing it standing up and moving around is really helpful, but find a way to get your energy up. And speak at your normal pace and make sure you have plenty of color, anecdotes, facts, and proof point. They help to paint a picture and tell the story. And because it is not a visual medium, painting that picture and telling a really colorful story is incredibly key and helpful. Broadcast, there it is again. Prepare and practice again. This is the old school of sit in front of the mirror in your bathroom and prepare, because you're going to be on either an Instagram Live, you're going to be on broadcast, you're going to be on YouTube, you're going to be where somebody is going to see you. So you want to know what you look like. You want to know, do I use my hands too much? Am I being too expressive with my face? Am I nodding and smiling? And a bunch of different techniques that I'm not going to go through here, but I'm going to leave you in this presentation. They're just some very basics about what to do with your hands, not to interrupt, not to nod too much, not to get into the hum, you like, you know, because that's not successful. You can always, and because unfortunately there are a lot of journalists out there in the world doing the jobs of what used to be 5 people, they don't have a lot of time. So more and more these days, you can ask in any medium I've just talked about for the questions in advance. And that is more and more the norm. As a matter of fact, and I find this a bit sad, more and more interviews are taking place over email. So you actually, in some cases, get the opportunity to write everything out exactly to your liking and make some edits, which is a very new thing. And again, I prefer old school, but it's more and more. And relax. It's supposed to be an interesting opportunity, all of these things. You're talking about your passion, you're talking about your expertise, you're talking about your knowledge, you're talking about your story. You should be excited to be there and tell that. Again, that applies to a pitch and that applies to a panel. You're there to talk about something that is meaningful and is exciting to you. You should be happy, unless you're on the other side of the conversation, and that's not what tonight is about, unless you're in a situation that involves crisis or you're in a situation that involves legal and investigative. Then it's an entirely different approach, and that's a different presentation, which I'm happy to come back and give, Cleo, if you ever like, because it's pretty interesting stuff. So on television, I'm not going to go through these. You can go through these at your leisure. If your business is more of a lifestyle perspective, this breaks down the different TV experiences. It breaks down the roles of the different people who are on the show and what they're there to do and what you're there to do with them. It breaks down how a segment is put together on a television show. just to give you a pretty good idea. It's all pretty basic. It comes down to preparation ultimately, and then some rules of the road for camera. And this applies to everything where people will see and hear your face and hear your voice. It talks about working with hosts on different segments as well, again, at your leisure, and you can always feed me some questions if you feel it's something you want to talk about. I've worked with a bunch of different lifestyle brands where I brought in to do this training with their celebrity spokespeople. And this process that I'm talking to you about, and hopefully under an hour tonight, is broken down over the course of 2 days and done real time. And we train them and we train them and we train them. And it's 2 full days of role playing and going back and forth. I've just recently finished one for a celebrity spokesperson for a large international cosmetics brand. And we were 3 days in a room with the poor girl, my goodness. And she was a trooper, but it takes a lot to get somebody up to that level. So again, don't worry if you don't feel like you're knocking it out of the park, because it is a lot of work to get good at this. But once you get good at it, you're kind of on the road. Talk a lot about preparation. And then a lot of people want to talk about social media and content. And I have learned a lot from folks like Cleo. I've learned a lot from some of the people that I work with, and I'm doing a lot of deep work in the space with content creators now. And one of the biggest pieces is it does come back to that story. So I was really kind of excited and refreshed to see that it is another avenue for storytelling. And it is a very powerful, when used for good and not evil, powerful avenue for voices and social storytelling, social justice, all sorts of things it can be great for. But at the end of the day, it is content. And at the end of the day, it is story. So your voice that you talk about in your story and what you stand for should translate to your social. It is another channel for you to express your brand and express your voice. Concise messaging and keeping it simple, something that you always want to go back to, what you could call your social signature online, is something to explore. Engage with followers in your community. Again, one of the bigger content creators that I'm working with right now, we actually have worked as a team to hire. She is a full-time person whose job it is just to reply to people in her direct messages across all of her channels. But make no mistake about it, we've now developed a brand Bible just for that one content creator. So we all know exactly what her voice should sound like. And it is huge, huge business. Product names are critical and should become second nature. So that should be something you're weaving into your messaging, and have one account. You don't need if the business is very personal to you, you can have a company account. But if it is a small business and it's wrapped around you as a founder, you don't need to. Social media live, not unlike broadcast, but you've got more time. If you're doing an Instagram live, you traditionally have about 27 to 30 minutes. And if you're doing other meetings of that, you have more time than you would. It's a more relaxed environment. There's more space to fill, so it's a lot of fun. Prep and practice is still really important, but you can improv and ad-lib a little bit more when you're doing things socially live. There's the opportunity to go super deep on product knowledge on your brand. And it's really cool because you have real-time followers and questions. But you still have to anticipate what people are going to ask if you are doing a live situation. Rehearsal is critical if you're doing Cape video, and it's completely okay. Rehearsing and rehearse and rehearse. My side hustle that I do in addition to my business is I'm a stand-up comic, which comes as a bit of a surprise to people because I look quite buttoned up. But I've been doing live stand-up now for 5 years, and I will not go on a stage until I've rehearsed the heck out of that 15 minutes. So I walk around my house for 2 days talking to myself before I get up on stage. Nobody would think about that when they see one of my shows, but rehearsal, I take it very seriously, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I can skip over the influencer. Now, here's the part that I think a lot of people want to get down to, and it's how do you get started on telling your story? I'm going to encourage everybody, if it is applicable to you in your business, please do the exercise that I outlined. Please reach out, ask me some questions if you feel like that and I find the time. Depending on the size of your budget for your business, you have to determine how much money you're going to allot to marketing and storytelling. It's a huge investment, and I think a lot of businesses, particularly in the startup phase, don't give it any priority over other things because they think that the story will tell itself, and that's not the case. And I think there has to be a line item in the budget to devote to if it makes sense for your business, and for most businesses it does. So I absolutely think it's valuable and it should be invested in. Do you use freelancers or do you use an agency to work with you? Now, the good news and the bad news about the way of the world right now, and that the media and the agency landscape has shifted to the point where a lot of people are not working, or a lot of people were let go from traditional positions. The great news is there are so many talented, let me repeat, so many talented freelancers in this space that do not cost the same big agency dollars. My friends that work at big agencies or run and own them that may or may not be watching this tonight are probably not happy to hear me say that, but there are so many talented people, from videographers, editors, writers, content creators, social media managers, assistants, that are out there hustling and doing such a great job. So that talent pool is actually very deep and very rich. And I talk about this in other presentations that I do. When I talk about your network is your net worth. I don't care where you are in your career, if you're just starting, if you're jumping out, if you're going into your network, your community of people in your life, professionally, socially, whatever it is, you have to nurture it like it's a garden, and you have to keep it growing. My network involves people that I've worked with for over 30 years, but I meet new people all the time, and you have to respect that relationship. You have to work on it. You have to find time to talk. In the real life world pre-COVID, you need to find time to get together. You need to find time to go to events. And once you've identified that a person or an organization can be beneficial to your life and your professional life, you have to work at it. And that's why I say your network is your net worth. That is not my saying. I did not come up with it, but it is one that I preach about pretty consistently. And it takes time. It's an investment like anything else. And your time is frankly your most important investment. Find all the opportunities you can to share your story. Practice telling your story as much as you want to, because you're only just going to get better at it. It will be second nature. Present as much as you can. Ask to present. Get up in front of a room and ask to present. If they're like, who wants to do the presentation? Nobody's raising their hand. Can you just take the opportunity and present? It is so helpful to practice. Talk out loud and to people. It's tough these days because we're all so digital. I'm very hopeful of things turning a corner, but at the same time, you have to talk with people and talk out loud and to people. If you find you're on the shyer side of the fence, the one thing that you may never change that, you may identify that you want somebody else to be the mouthpiece, but I would encourage everybody to find as much connection as you can when you want to tell your story to people. Get involved in a cause. It cannot hurt. It's such a wonderful, positive way to give back to the world, which is our responsibility, I fundamentally feel, as humans, to find a way to come full circle. The charity that I support and I have for a long time, the older I got in a more serious and senior capacity, is CAMH. And I'm very passionate about it for a number of reasons that are very personal to me. But I would be lying if I said that it hasn't contributed to my network and my career over the year, because it absolutely has. There's a path for all of us. And the more people that you meet and the more things that you open your mind to, you'll just be surprised at what will come back to you in a positive way. And hustle. I mean, I've been freelancing since I was 20, and I hustle. And I feel that hustle is something that you absolutely cannot teach somebody. You can identify someone with hustle in a heartbeat. And it is one thing that if you are on the entrepreneurial side of the business, you need to have it. You need to hustle. And I look at someone, I'll use Cleo because she's the reason why I'm here, and I'm very grateful for her, is she's got more hustle in her little finger than I've seen most people have in their whole body. Like, I'm working 4 jobs. I'm going to raise my hand. I want the opportunity. Let's go. I'm in the room and I'm talking. You just have to move and you have to keep going. And it's so difficult in the situation that we're in. But at the end of the day, it's hustle or die. And I believe that that will only help. And that is it for me. So I'm going to stop share and hope everybody enjoyed my presentation. How'd I do? I did exactly an hour. I'm a champion. Cleo, I don't think that's happened before.
Yeah, you slaughtered it. You totally crushed it. Everybody is, no, you murdered it. Listen, I feel like first of all, the chat was quiet because I think everybody was just busy listening to you. And if that is not an indicator, guys, of what a masterful storyteller Deb is, you guys, if you've been in startup school before, you know your chats are always on and popping. So I guess let's get to asking questions. If anybody has questions, can you use the hand raise function? If you don't know how to use that, you can definitely send me a message, but I prefer you use hand raise because then it's easier for me to see everybody. Hold on one second. Let me pull up all these doohickeys so that I can make this work. So one person was asking actually in the chat, hold on. And then next will come John in just a second. They were asking about costs. Who had asked about that? Where's my chat? Okay, yeah, so someone—
Pam. Pam said it's me.
Oh, hi Pam. Yeah, Pam had asked, can you give a sense of investment dollars to itemize in a startup? But did you want to clarify that a little bit more, Pam?
Sure. Hi there, Deb. That was awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This is my first event. I'm Chef Pam Fanjoy. I'm the founder of Fanjoy, which is a culinary social enterprise. I'm a Chop Canada champion and 5 years into my culinary business after a successful career as a clinical social worker. So now I'm marrying my two passions of working with youth and families and using food to do that. So in the first 5 years of my startup, I wish someone had told me how valuable it was to throw marketing dollars into my budget. And I have really just begun to realize how important that is in the last year and a half or so. And then of course the pandemic hit and my restaurant has been hit. So I am at a point now, we've pivoted massively. And this week we are actually having a strategic planning session in my business. And a big part of it is around our marketing and how to get our brand story out there and to start doing more public speaking and really getting the purpose of what we're doing clear and be able to convey that with our clients, our customers, and our fans. So, but how do you determine when
How
you're
much money?
forecasting? Like, should it be 5% of your gross sales? Like, is there a
No.
rule of thumb?
Yes. The rule of thumb is 25% of your gross sales. That's the rule of thumb across the board. 25% of your gross sales should be what you are allotting against telling your story. Now, there are a lot of people that have a lot of different numbers in that space. My rule is, the agency that I worked at last, the founder of the agency, who is a mentor of mine, wanted to really start to pivot the agency to working with a lot of startup founders in the fintech space. And when we would sit in boardrooms with guys like Mike Serbinis, some of the biggest names in tech that were then starting their next venture, and marketing was never a high priority, we would say 25% of gross sales, and their CFO would just drop to the floor. But it's the truth, because they think PR is free. They're like, we'll just get a bunch of stories in the press. It doesn't work like that. You have to invest against your marketing dollars. Now, the good news is executing against a lot of the content is not as expensive as it used to be. I have a client that I'm working with right now. We're about to announce a big automotive partnership. And one of her Instagram reels that she's producing and shooting has the capacity to be in front of more eyeballs on Instagram and TikTok for maybe this thing's going to cost us $5,000. And the automotive brand that we're working with probably has a marketing budget in the hundreds of millions. But they now know and they recognize the value that her creative avenue and her positioning for this brand just through social media will probably get more play than them airing it during a national morning show, which frankly, 22 people between the ages of 18 and 49 probably watch. So how people are spending their money in the marketing space and the resources that are out there, it's really interesting. A lot of people say, oh, things are dying and media is changing, whatever. I only see opportunity for young creators. So 25%, that's my minimum spend. That's what I advise people.
Amazing. Next up, we have John and then Diane. So John, go ahead. You can unmute yourself and ask Deb your question.
Yes, I like the others in the group. Have found myself, I do rolfing and acupuncture, and at our bed and breakfast, but I've been involved with doing desserts, and my pivot was to do vegan desserts and like all these like wonderful, Willy Wonka type desserts. But it's like, how do you communicate that? And it's just been, it's always been difficult to put out there the alternative healing work with the raw thing. And I see the same thing now happening with the, vegan ice cream and some of the specialty ice creams that we're doing. And it can be daunting.
So what's the question?
Yeah, I think the question is several of the clients, including Pam, we have these specialized products that we're doing and services that we're doing, and it's really hard to differentiate. And you talked about putting your story together, but it's I guess I need to focus on your questions more.
Yeah, but
yeah,
the great opportunity in the space where I love your story, by the way, because I love vegan ice cream, so yay. But the opportunity with Pam's story too is that what I'm finding, particularly during this, let's just call it what it is, it has been an insane year. But the pivoting and the way that people are making these businesses work during this time, there's two different things. Is one, for your business in particular, you have an advantage and you have a disadvantage. The advantage is you're part of a movement that is only getting louder. The clean eating, vegan, plant-based food movement, alternative medicine, holistic wellness, all of that, you are on a train, John, that is just left the station and it is not coming home anytime soon. So you are part of a movement is what your business is. So congratulations to you for embracing that. Pam taking her business and working with as a trained chef in food and family, how we feed our families and how we feed our kids and what we feed our children and what that contributes to their physical welfare, mental health, all of it. Those narratives are incredibly strong and powerful. So you're already ahead with the fact that you're in a space that has so much groundswell underneath it. It's really, really interesting. Your job is to identify how your story is your story. And what is it about your brand that you think is going to differentiate you and make you special from the other ones? But the good news is you don't have to worry about your community because your community is already a powerful space. So if I was working with you, I would say what you just said. Answer those questions. Really, really dig deep and what is different about your brand. We just recently did some work and had the founder of Smart Sweets reach out. I love this brand. I love everything about it. I love that she's Canadian. I love that she identified low sugar and sweets. I think her brand is a wildly success story. She reached out to work with my client and I. And if you go take some time to go pop around the competition site on some brands that have been runaway successes, you'll see there is a common theme. It is her story. It is, I was a mother of two in Vancouver, and I identified that my kids' sugar intake was not good for their mental health. So I said, forget it. The Neal brothers, they're a great Canadian story. If you think there's a common thing, everybody tells a personal story. So I don't know, bed and breakfast vegan ice cream, where in the country are you?
I'm actually in Hawaii.
Oh, poor baby. We're in lockdown, John. Next question. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, good for you, John. Happy COVID.
Awesome.
I'm in Collingwood, Ontario, where nobody can leave the house, but
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. We're fine. We're very lucky. Answer the questions, John. Truly, take the exercise, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised in what you're going to find out.
Amazing. Next up, thank you, John. We have Diane Rosenstoll.
Hi, guys. Excellent presentation, by the way. Awesome. My question is regarding like podcasts and like the messaging or the branding, like how far out before the launch should you prepare that to happen?
As a guest on a podcast or launching your own podcast?
Launching your own.
How far in advance should you prepare the messaging on your podcast?
Yeah, like the marketing, the messaging of it, the branding of it. Before it actually gets-
Oh, the same time you're developing the brand for everything else. I'm a huge believer in what I said in the earlier top of my presentation. Once you have your brand messaging, your positioning, your story, everything about it, that language gets applied to every piece of your business. So if I'm working with someone and I've just finished this work with another creator, we've done her brand story, we've done the name of her company, we've done her position, and that brand position, because listen, you have to get bang for your buck because you're not starting out with a lot of money. And it is everything that you do needs to apply. It needs to apply to the name of your cookbook. It needs to apply to your podcast. It should be your website. It needs to be your social tags. It needs to bleed throughout the entire business. You're not creating a separate marketing plan for the podcast versus the TV show versus the book versus the online Shopify launch. Everything needs to be harmonious and together. Keep it simple.
Right. And that's like the podcast is the business per se, right? The podcast itself is the business. That's why
Yep.
it's been mixed messaging about waiting till the podcast launches. And then, I've been told anywhere from, don't keep it quiet until the podcast launches. And then
No,
build-
nobody's going to listen to your podcast if you're quiet till the podcast launches. I think you need to get a few episodes under your belt that you're really confident about, and you need to start talking about it.
Okay.
My client's launching her podcast in May. We're chase producing the first 5 guests right now. Now, we have the advantage of working with a giant production company because she's a superstar and it's going to be awesome.
Right.
We will start talking about our podcast when we have our first 5 interviews done.
Okay. Awesome. Okay.
And
Fantastic.
that's a good piece of advice because you can be like, guys, this podcast I'm launching, the first 5 episodes, we're going to talk to Jessica Alba, whoever it is. We're covering motherhood, family, food. It's going to be epic. I can't wait for you to be a part of it. But that way you have content to tease. And if your business is your podcast, your product is your content.
Right. Right.
Cleo and her partners have a hysterical and really successful podcast. It's one of my faves, not just because I was on it, but because they're hysterical and they're interesting to listen to. They tease the content out. Like,
Right on, Chloe.
I'm Cleo, but
Sorry,
thank you.
Cleo.
It's okay.
yeah. So guys, I've got about 10 more minutes before I actually have to go be a mom.
So we have 2 more questions. We have Favor,
Great.
and then we have.
He's actually
Sorry.
outside the door. I've locked it. He can't get in here, but he
Oh,
knows.
culturally B, we love him. Yeah, so we have Favor, and then Sorry, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
I just want to say this has been amazing. So thanks for going through that 1 hour session. My question is that I have a startup. We just got into a accelerator program, and I'm also a VP of public relations from a Toastmasters group. And I was given a chance to sort of like share my story, get interviewed for a respectful news site here in Toronto. I'm in Toronto, Canada. My question is, when is it the right time? Because all we're doing now is asking questions for this tech startup. We're interviewing people, potential customers, but we haven't yet rolled out our MVP. It's still in the works. So any tips on, do you think it would be smart to go out there and talk about what we're working on when we haven't even built our first product yet?
So I think the answer is one of the things that I talked about. I think you've answered your own question. If you feel you've got a story to tell and you've got news that actually has proof points against it, then now is a good time to tell your story. If you think it's premature and you don't have news that you think people can bite on, wait. But if you're like, listen, we have a website, we have a management team, we've got a brand promise, we have a mission, we've just done our first deal, we've just secured Series A's funding, you've got a story to tell. You have to have news though, because if you're just going out with nothing that is going to give those proof points to your story that I talked about, it's a bit soon and it's a bit premature.
Got
But
it.
good for you on the Toastmasters thing. That's fantastic. Keep doing more of that. Do all of those. Honest to God, if the president of the Association of Dog Walkers wants you to come and give a speech, go. Seriously, do it. You get to practice speaking, and being able to practice speaking is so critical, especially as a young person, which I'm just assuming you are because you don't look as old as, well, me.
Thank you. That was awesome.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Last question. Sorry, go ahead.
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for that. It's really insightful, really helpful. I am a co-founder of a startup in Toronto. It's a food delivery startup for offices, and obviously COVID has had a big impact on us, but counterintuitively, or counter to what one might expect, we actually grew a lot in the last year just because of our business model and what we've been able to do with COVID guidelines and delivering food safely. We actually grew by over 300% over the last year since COVID started, and grew our team. I think we have a really good story to tell. We've expanded to Vancouver as well. But what I'm having trouble with, and what I'm looking for some guidance, is how to knock on journalists' door. How do we let journalists know that we have a good story to tell? It's one thing that we had one article released about us in Taste Toronto, which is very digital and focused on how we're basically keeping restaurants, helping restaurants throughout the pandemic by increasing volume of orders. But other than that, that's the issue that I've been having, is how to knock doors and start those conversations with the journalists.
Yeah, and I've got an answer for that. So it's a great question. You need to hire yourself an intern, and you need that intern to put together a database of journalists for you, including who they write for, what their contact is. Cleo's laughing because she heard me say this.
It sucks. So it's hard to do.
It sucks. Because if you're not in the position to hire an agency to do that work for you, which it sounds like you could be soon. There are a lot of really great hustling PR agencies out there that day that you could pay the money to, or get an intern. And you get that person to create a media database for you that is relevant to your business and your beat and your story. And you are going to start pitching. You're going to start pitching the business. And that pitch is going to be an email. And it is going to have a compelling headline that is going to want that person to open up that email, read your story, and want to talk to you. You look what Mohammed from Paramount Foods has done with his business during this time. And there has been, in addition to him being an incredible human being and having his business give back to the communities in which they serve, and particularly from an underserviced, marginalized community, immigrant standpoint, during COVID, he has had one singular story time, and that is feeding frontline workers. And the momentum he has gained around that, he has created his own news. I am a huge fan of that brand. I'm a huge fan of this person, this company. I've never met him. I would love to meet him. But you also can create your own news. What is your company doing that nobody else is doing? Make it up, figure it out, and then tell that story. Because if I'm a journalist, a company creating a food delivering service during a pandemic is not news. I don't care about that story. I don't want to read that story. Mohammed having his organization contribute to feeding the fight for frontline workers during, excuse me, a global pandemic in my backyard, I'm interested in that story.
Awesome, perfect. And I guess my second question was, should we look at a PR agency? But you've already answered that. Yeah.
If you have money and you can afford a minimum $5,000 a month retainer, you can find yourself a good agency in this country that will help you out. I'm also losing my voice, guys. Sorry.
Amazing. Sorry, thank you so much for those questions. Everybody, thank you for another night at Startup School. Deb, my sweet, sweet angel, God bless your soul for being here again.
No worries.
I found the perfect person to talk about this. Everybody fill out your surveys. Tell us how awesome Startup School is so we can keep bringing all this great stuff to you and bringing back people like Deb. And everybody have a great night until we meet again.
Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.
Okay, you can find Deb on LinkedIn, by the way, to Pam, who asked. Her name is Deb Belcourt, Belcourt. Belcourt. All right, bye,
everybody. Thanks, Cleo.
You're welcome.
Thanks for organizing that, Cleo.